all your work in one place, even work from other platforms.
We are in our opening session for the year, and we look forward to delivering quality content programming for our viewers and audience. We want to wish everyone a happy new year. Thankful for being here again with the S.H.E Gallery. I'm Trixter, your host for this particular session. I'll be hosting a few sessions again for this season. I'm looking forward to it. S.H.E Gallery is doing wonderful work in the community, and we're just looking forward to delivering the best that we can with what we do. First off, again, Happy New Year. Hope everyone's New Year is going okay. And we're looking forward to our next session. Okay, so welcome to the fresh season for S.H.E Gallery Show for 2022. We're going to be talking about art again, graffiti, street art, urban art forms, and we're also going to give reference to an upcoming show that S.H.E Gallery is hosting. For those of you who are viewing tonight, thank you for joining us. Please contact us or join in on the call. You can reach us at 312-738-1060, and alternatively, you can watch us online at CanTV21, www.cantv.org/hotline. Again, I'm Trixter, your host, and tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about different aspects of the art form and what the practitioners hold true to what they do. In essence, we're going to be talking about the different styles and how to recognize different types of graffiti and graffiti art, and some of the basic concepts of how it began and how it's structured. Okay, so on the international front and the local front, a lot of people wonder about the variance that we have when it comes to graffiti and graffiti styles. Some of it national, state to state, country to country, artist to artist, crew to crew. So these are all elements of what we do with our art form. Style is very coveted. Its originality in style is also very coveted. Considered a requisite for fledgling artists. So if you're just beginning, you tend to need to learn and practice from some of the things that you see out there in the field, or some of the other things that you may see coming along and coming up as you get, progress with your art form. Again, we're mentioning the show that S.H.E Gallery is going to be curating. It's going to be hosted at the Epiphany Center, which information will be made available on S.H.E Gallery's website at sharinghisenergygallery.net. Okay, so we're going to look at some videos, and we're going to look at a few articles and talk about the main topic of our show that's upcoming. And this particular session's main focal point is what we call Family Resemblance. That is the title, one of the working titles of the show that's coming up in March. And we chose that title as a reference, to give reference to what it is that we do, because a lot of crews, they consider themselves a family. And what they do, a lot of people have variations in what they do, as artists. But as a crew, a lot of artists have similar techniques and styles that they propagate and that they put out there. They tend to do coordinated murals and with uniformity, matching colors, things of that nature. So family resemblance came from an initial topic or initial subject from a world-famous philosopher, one of the most famous philosophers of the 20th century. And as we all know what philosophy is, this particular philosopher, his name was Ludwig Wittgenstein. He's a philosopher from Austria, I think. And the reason we chose this title is because he created a discourse that focused around art and and the interpretation of art can be how it's perceived. Is it emotionally perceived? Is it aesthetically perceived? Is it intellectually perceived? How is it that you really appreciate art? Think about that for a moment. When you look at some art, is it an emotional response? How do you share what's your thoughts and feelings and reactions upon viewing this art? You utilize language. So the commonality between these things and the medium that interpretation gets put into is language. And being that we are just, again, in some of our previous sessions, we talked about the information economy, the information age, the knowledge economy, and things of that nature. And this relates to what we do as we are artists, and we focus on letters and letter forms as graffiti artists. That is a focal point. Although we do full compositions, we tend to focus in primarily the letters and the letter forms. The reason being, we're just coming out of an information economy. So every age that you're in reflects the art of that age. So our age currently, as it's moving along into a knowledge and energy economy, is encompassed in what we call information and technology. So our art form is reflective of an age, and it deals with information, working with the letter form, encrypting and decrypting the letter form, and this is a core aspect of that and what we're talking about with style families. So a style family, as we all know, graffiti artists have crews, and they have different three-letter acronyms that represent their crews, and this is reflective of many things in society. As again, I say, we're reflective of the entire age that we're in. And so our art reflects information. It's done. It's the focus point. The focal point is information, the letter form. So that's what our topic is going to be about tonight. And before we jump a little bit and delve more into it, we're going to take a look at the philosopher that I mentioned just previously, and we're going to look at some of his work. So give me a moment. We're going to take a look at a webpage on it. All right, this is the show, Family Resemblance, the Evolution of Chicago-Style Graffiti. The mention of evolution, as that is a big topic of ours, of how different styles of writing evolved to come from its most primitive. As you all know, or if you don't know, I will review later some of the finer details on that as we go along. But essentially, the evolution of different styles of graffiti happened in varying formats. So this show will be upcoming, and one aspect it is going to focus on is Chicago-style graffiti and how it grew and through the years, and some of the key contributors from the original artists that came here that were migrants from New York or other cities, and some of the original artists that were from Chicago that were also active. This will be a focal point of the show. So please, stay tuned and join in. Please visit sharinghisenergygallery.net. And you can find out more information on this as we go along. And this is going to be held at the Epiphany Center. It's a up-and-coming, or rather prominent, art center here in Chicago. All righty, let's move on. We're going to go on and look into Wittgenstein. Let's find out some of his philosophies on art.
Hi, we're Misfits Market. We rescue organic produce and surplus pantry staples from sustainable.
So then, how would you define art? Well, I would agree with Wittgenstein and favour the idea that art does not have a definition. Wittgenstein believed that this worked perfectly well because we did not need to rely on a definition of art. He claimed that art as a term can, and for the most part does, function perfectly well without a definition, and this does not undermine our ability to know what we are talking about when we use the words in question. We all have a concept of art and are able to understand it without a universal definition, so it is not essential to define exactly what art is. Where one may find pleasure in art, others may not. This is because art can be very subjective to an individual, so we are unable to universally identify it. Wittgenstein believed there wasn't a definitive answer to the question, what is art? But how can we know what art is if it cannot be defined? Wittgenstein showed how words can have more than one meaning, yet they can be clearly understood. He used many examples to illustrate this point. We've already discussed beauty, so let's take beauty as an example. We know what beauty is, but the beauty of a face is something different from the beauty of a chair or a flower. but we still understand all of them as beautiful. I see. Another famous example was making people think of games. We all understand what games are and can recognize them when we see them. So think of board games, card games, ball games, Olympic games, maybe even one person throwing a ball against the wall. They are all completely different types of games, and they share very few similarities, but they are all still games. There is no universal definition and no common characteristic that runs through all of them, but we understand them all to be games. And just like there can be different types of games, there can be different types of art. This may include varieties such as music, drawing, painting, acting, dancing, that are always evolving and changing over time. There is no one answer to the question, what is art, and no universal definition. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but without some sort of universal criteria, without some
Okay, that was just the introductory primer to some of the tenets of what Mr. Wittgenstein emphasized in his publications throughout the years. Now, the reason we emphasizing this is because Mr. Wittgenstein wrote this book and published these publications in the 1950s. He did some stuff in the 20s, the 50s, and things of that nature, and they still stand true today. They're some of the most widely talked about things as it relates to defining what art is or isn't, and he's a mainstay in the academic arena. So I thought this would be pretty interesting because his whole take on it, in a more simpler sense, he summated it. Let me summate it. I have a quote from one of his books. Mr. Wittgenstein sought to bypass the difficulty of definition of art by looking to the way knowledge is used in natural languages. He saw knowledge as a case of family resemblance. The local context where the topic of family resemblance appears is Wittgenstein's critique of language and philosophical investigations, which is one of his most well-known publications. He says the plurality of language uses is compared to the plurality of games. Next, it is asserted that games have common features, but none is found in all of them. The whole argument has become famous under the heading of language games. Now, we're emphasizing this because the concept of, he said it's a language game. Think about this for a moment. Language, information age, language games, and interpretation, because graffiti was once, at one point, was deemed to be not an art form. And at this point, the greatest philosopher of the 20th century defined it otherwise, as there's no way to really interpret it because it's all about a language game and how people's interpretation of what it is, because you also have an emotional response to which can't be perceived externally, right? Relating to an objective item that you're observing. So this is the focal point of what we talk about in family resemblance, because what the essence will be about Chicago-style graffiti is who resembles what? How did styles originate? How did different styles of graffiti happen in New York, California? Again, our topic on previous sessions was about the simultaneity of how hip-hop culture and graffiti and other forms happen. They happen simultaneously across the world, primarily. So that was one instance that we wanted to emphasize. Moving along, though, we're going to look a little bit more into the styles of graffiti. We're going to take a look at another video in a moment, but I just want to present a couple points and see what y'all take on it is. Please give us a call, and we would like some input. 312-738-1060, or alternatively online, you can view this cantv.org/hotline. I'm Trixter, your host for this particular session. Looking forward to delivering great content this season. Our S.H.E Gallery founder, Ms. Diaz, will be also delivering varying sessions throughout the year as well. We look forward to having her return. Okay, we're talking about art and interpretation. Again, a lot of people thought that it wasn't, but now we've surpassed that point. We've went into different avenues with art. In our previous sessions, we talked about where the art form is, where it's going, and where it's headed, and how we want to steer it and make sure that it becomes a mainstay, as there have not been any new genres of art created since graffiti and graffiti art. And it's still reigning as the most popular youth-based and ongoing art form that we have because of its dynamism. Again, I ask, how do you interpret art? Think about that for a moment. How would you show or share your appreciation of that art? Purchasing, expressing. Again, we come back to language, right? It comes back to language. So, oh, it mix this, I like this, it looks good, I like those colors. So those becoming defining factors that relates to artistic interpretation. And in your experience of witnessing or viewing art. It relates to the senses. It's a sensual pleasure, right? It relates to aesthetic value. And another aspect of it is art as investment. Art is like the third or fourth investment sector, which is becoming more popular. Art is a very serious thing that can be used in investments. And as far as art critics deliver their interpretation verbally using language. And based upon those tenets, it determines how certain people feel and agree upon what determines what art really is. So that'll be a focal point of what we talk about at this gallery event. So please stay tuned, and we'll be delivering different aspects of how the show will be going as we go along. Okay, so family resemblance. The other element of how that relates to what we do as graffiti artists is the different crews. The different crews of artists, again, they have families of style where whole crews paint similar. Some crews have different artists that paint totally different, have their own. The whole aspect of graffiti forms was about originality and being innovative. And if you notice, we can look at some art pieces in a moment, and we're going to look at that to determine the variation. Now, there are some common elements to graffiti and graffiti forms that are, I guess you could say, universal, meaning that all artists do them and share them, and they are basic structural elements that relate to what we do. But then individuality is the goal. Is the goal to innovate and create variance in style. That is the focal point. Okay, so please give us a call. We'd like to get some callers to hear your take on this. Please join us, 312-738-1060. We are live on cantv.org/hotline. I'm Trixter, the host, and we're here with the S.H.E Gallery Show. Okay, we're going to venture off again, and we're going to take a look at different aspects of styles in a moment. But one more element I'd like to share with you is the whole concept of artistic design and genres in general as they relate to what we produce. Again, the word form is universal, as a pictorial image. Some people think that letters and letter forms don't have every exact element of composition as it relates to art and design and its overall structure. All of these things are emulated or are comparable to the pictorial image. Symmetry, all these things relate to having symmetry, one side matches the other, right? So letter forms have varying types of symmetry as well. The structure of a letter, when you create a one-dimensional letter form, you have what's called a skeleton structure, right? As it relates to the parallel to the pictorial or the human form or any other type of visual or object or what have you. It has a structural element called a skeleton. And once you take it out of the one dimension and you bring it into two dimensions, you have the skeleton becomes internalized. And then you have a second element added to it, and where you can add shadow and depth. So it goes on and on. It's a science, and it's growing, and we're looking forward to elaborating on these principles. Okay, let's take a look at, another key point is all elements of artistic genres as they relate. We also emulate and emphasize them in the letter form as well. Realism, conceptualism, distortion, abstraction, exaggeration, like when you see a caricature, you know, you have the artist draw caricatures of a person, and they have elongated heads and small hands, or they emphasize different elements of the face, large nose, ears. Those are emulated in the characters that you see in a lot of the graffiti forms. So all these relate to different genres of art. Abstraction is a genre in itself. Distortion is another element of it. Conceptualization, we have all these things featured in the form that we do. Okay, moving along, another thing to be aware of is the concept of what an art form is collectively. Medicine is an art form. Technology is an art form. If we can look these titles up, let's take a look and so give you an idea of what we're referring to. Okay, let's go back. You can do a quick Google search and it'll give you a reference to what it is that I'm referring to. So when you go medicine, how is medicine a form of art? So you understand when people say what is or isn't art. Medicine as an art form from the government, from the national the center. This is a national government organization. These are documents that relate to how medicine is not just a science, it's also an art. Think about these things. Now, also you can look at the culinary arts. Food is called culinary arts. It's an art form. Technology. Now let's take a look at this really quick, as I know we're getting closer to our closing. But technology also is an art form. It's an art, right? And it goes on. When a work of art reaches its highest form, it becomes a type of technology. When a piece of technology reaches its highest form, we call it art. So technology, as I mentioned before, is a utilitarian art form. But our focus again, let's look at some of the history of graffiti styles and how that relates.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be dissecting some graffiti artists' piece, and this really comes to us from Michael Vasquez over on the community portion of my page, where he suggested that I compare old school graffiti to new school graffiti and kind of dissect both of those things. So that's what we're going to be doing in today's video. We're going to be taking a look at some old school graffiti artists, seeing what makes their pieces good, and then seeing how that's affected graffiti nowadays and dissecting new school graffiti. Now, I think it's pretty important to note that graffiti progressed a lot over a very short amount of time, and it progressed from normal fonts. And I use the word fonts because it not only progressed from graffiti artists looking at, like newspapers, books, and seeing the letters in there and doing those, as you can see here with Lee's piece, but it also progressed from normal print font, which gives you the very textbook straight letters that we all know and love and use as our fundamentals today, as you can see right here in Scheme's piece. Now, these fundamentals aren't made up. These fundamentals aren't made specifically for graffiti. These fundamentals are things that letters themselves have always had since letters were created. This is just the nature of how they work. So when we have someone like Tracy168 say things like,
"You don't want to lose the basis of the letter."
I'm JB Pritzker, and I've always said that I'll be a governor for all Illinoisans, to even the playing field and fight for equal pay, to support...
Okay, let's switch back. Okay, so that was just a brief excerpt of a video. It mentions different aspects of the graffiti form and how letter forms do share a commonality and universality. Letter form is universal. We call it universal because 26 letters encompass everything in existence. As far as a descriptive sense, we can utilize it, be it vaguely, right, at best or most, but for lack of better terms, we can utilize language to be descriptive of reality. And it's 26 letter forms. Okay, we're going to continue. We're going to be closing soon, and we look forward to having y'all attend. And please tune in for the next session. We're going to close out on this video, and we look forward to seeing you. Okay, all right, we got a little bit more time. We're going to look at this video again, get a little more elaboration.
really ends up making a lot of sense, because even when you look at a more wild style piece, or even just a slightly stylized piece like S.H.E here, you can still very much see that he's beginning to add style to his letters, but he's not losing the letter. And just as an example to show you how letters structures fit together, as you can see here, the green top of S.H.E E connects to the red portion of S.H.E E. These boxes connect on vertices. Once again, this is just how letters work. This isn't something specific to graffiti, this is literally just the letter's anatomy. So stuff like this definitely carried over to new school graffiti. And that's very important to note, that's very important to understand, because that's what makes any amount of style you add to your letters work, is if you maintain the letter, as you can see here in Does piece, or even here in Zephyr's piece. Both of these you can still very much point out the letters. The letters don't have to be super legible, but the letters structure are always there. The letter structures are never broken. And that's a similarity between both old school and new school graffiti, is the quality pieces, the good pieces, maintain letter structure. That is by far the most important part of graffiti. But furthermore, you can see the beginnings of style nowadays back in the old school days of graffiti. Now I want to show you guys a couple of different examples for the progression of style, and I want to start off with Zephyr. Now if we take a look here at Zephyr's piece, something really interesting is going on here, because at first glance it doesn't really look like he's doing much, but he's using more advanced structures for some of his letters, like E. That's not a basic structure E. Granted, it's a straight letter, so it's pretty basic, but the basic structure for an E looks more along the lines of S.H.E E, as you can see here, not this E. So now we have the development of style, where they're starting to break away from basic print font, and they're starting to break away from basic type, and they're starting to get into more advanced structures by distorting the letters in certain ways that still maintain the structure, once again as shown in the E. Another interesting thing to point out is these red areas here on the letters. These are serifs. Now graffiti serifs and type serifs can be a little bit different, just because type serifs are very constrained in what they can do, as to where in graffiti they can do a lot more. They can extend and they can be a little more stylized. And you'll see the serifs here marked in red. Now these red serifs are a little bit different than the other serifs on the PHYR. And the reason for that is these red serifs become a part of the structure, as to where the PHYR does not become a part of the structure. It's merely a serif off of the structure. And really the defining factor here, what makes them different, is that for the Z and the E, these serifs change your line order, as to where on the other serifs, those don't change your line order. And what that means is, if you were to write out these letters, you're going to start here with the red, and then you're going to go to the green in order to finish the actual letter, and then you're going to go to the last red. As to where with the other letters, you wouldn't start with those serifs. You would simply just do the letter and then add the serif after, if you were to just do this in normal print font. So just to put it all in a nutshell, here in Zephyr's piece we're seeing advanced structure. He doesn't need to use that kind of E. And he's starting to add extra boxes in the form of serifs that are pivotal to the actual structure of the letter, which once again carries over to new school graffiti, as you can see here in Does piece, and as you can see here in Sever's piece. Now in this piece we all see one more thing that's a little spectacular, and that's this bend on the bottom of the Z that's completely unnecessary and 100% for style. This right here is the early ways of letter distortion. Now for those guys who don't know, a letter distortion is when you have a letter and you distort its actual letter structure to a completely unnecessary way for the sake of style. Now this letter distortion is not an extension of any kind, and the bottom of Zephyr Z nowadays would not be considered a letter distortion, but it's the start of letter distortions today. Now it's probably important to say Zephyr may not be the first person to have done this, but I'm just using him for this example. So now we take a look at this part of the E right here. This is modern letter distortions. Notice how the E is still very much an E. It's still the same exact structure, but he took that box, he shifted it upwards, adding another box, and then shifted it back down, adding yet another box. It still remains as the same structure, but there's a distortion within there. Now this topic gets a little bit deep, so I don't want to spend too much time on it because this literally is a video deserving of its own. But this is a comparison between old school graffiti and new school. And what you gotta understand is the old school graffiti artists, they're not gonna be doing super crazy advanced wild styles that we're seeing today, because that simply just wasn't a concept that existed back then. Like wild styles definitely existed, but not to the way they are today. We only got to where we are today because we built off of what they taught us in the past. As you can see, once again, we have the advanced letter structures we have today because of the people in the past. We have the extensions we have today for the same reason, and we have letter distortions that we have today, once again, because of the people in the past. But we also got something else. We also learned how to position our letters and how to connect connect our letters from our forefathers in the past. And we could see that right here in Dondi's piece. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, the way you connect letters is by connecting them on vertices, or you can overlap and then erase the overlap. But the overlap still needs to flow, and that's exactly what we see in Dondi's piece right here. The D overlaps the O just a little bit. The O overlaps the N just a little bit. The N meets up perfectly with the D, and the D once again matches up perfectly with the I. But as you'll notice, he connected all of these, so you can't actually see the full line of the D, and you can't see the full line of the O, or the N, or the D, or the I. But if we were to draw those lines in, as you can see, the red line of the D is the continuation of that line, but the blue portion is the reason this works. It's the reason that that red portion is erased. It's the reason the overlap makes it flow, and it's how he's able to connect, because the blue part of the D is uniform and similar to the blue part of the O. When you have that uniformity there, you're allowed to erase that for a seamless connection between those letters. And you'll see this happens again between the O and the N. He's taking one letter with another letter and positioning them in such a way where they overlap enough to get the D's similar line close enough in proximity to the O's similar line. This way they flow. And you don't have to see that line in order for it to work. Now the pink lines are something totally different. This is what's called a tangent. This is a shared line tangent, to be more specific. There's a whole bunch of tangents as well. There are way too many for this video. But shared line tangents are where you're gonna go ahead and take one line that's identical to another line, put them right on top of one another, and erase that overlap. That's what you're seeing here on the N and the I. This still follows line and letter uniformity and similarity, which increases flow. So although the line isn't visually there, you know it's there. So it still works. If you guys haven't seen my video on flow, I recommend you watch it. It's a great video. It's going to teach you literally everything you need to know for flow. I'll leave it in the cards wherever those pop up, and I'll leave it in the description down below. Really good video. Check it out. So right here, we're learning how to connect our letters. We're understanding how this works and the science behind it. Now this certainly isn't the only way to connect letters, but it's without a doubt one of the most common ways to connect letters, which you can see this marked in blue in the Zephyr piece here. If we take those blues away, you'll see how Zephyr actually used the tangents in order to connect the letters as opposed to using the overlap. Either one works. In this instance, he decided to use the tangents. Now lastly, we have letter and line uniformity and similarity. So here in the scheme piece, we can see how he has this kind of extension that looks similar to a serif on the top of the S. It extends a little over the top of the S, and he's got something similar on the K. And he's got something uniform to the K, but similar to the S on the E. And then he's got something similar on the M, and then to repeat it once again on the E. This creates flow. He's creating a visual that's like, hey, look, it's on this letter, this letter, this letter, and this letter. All these letters are related. And you still see this throughout today, where graffiti artists are making sure multiple letters share similar features or uniform features with one another. As we can see here, I feel like in this video it's very important to mention, especially for newer graffiti artists, that your pieces don't have to be crazy wild styles. But it seems like nowadays newer graffiti artists, younger graffiti artists have this notion in their mind that if it's not a wild style, it's not good, and straight letters suck. But honestly, you can't do wild styles without straight letters. But once again, not to overplay it, but as Tracy168 said, you gotta lose the letter without losing the letter. And if you don't know how to do a basic straight letter, you're gonna lose the letter. If you're just starting off in graffiti, you shouldn't be focused on that. These things we looked at today are what you need to learn in order to be able to do graffiti well. So ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you guys enjoyed the comparison between old school graffiti versus new school graffiti, what's carried over between the two, and why both of those were good. But you know what, once again, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, show me that love with that like button down below and share this.
Alrighty. Okay, that was a good summation. We're going to elaborate as we go along. Again, let me pull up this show really quick so you have reference for it. It's going to be coming up. Give me one moment. Here we go. There we go. Family Resemblance, the evolution of Chicago-Style Graffiti. S.H.E Gallery is going to be curating the show. It's going to be a really great show. We're looking forward to having everyone attend. It's going to have an all-star lineup of artists, some of the pioneers here in the Chicago scene. And we look forward to having y'all attend. Again, we're live at cantv.org/hotline. I'm Trixter, your host. This is the S.H.E Gallery show. S.H.E Gallery is instrumental in the community in bringing quality programming in conjunction with CAN TV, and we look forward to continuing this throughout the year.